hope we are energized and I hope you like the banana dance. So let's proceed with the test construction. What are the do's and don'ts? What are the thumbs up rule? And what are the different things that we need to bear in mind when we construct the different types of tests? Very important to understand first what are the stages in terms of making tests. As teachers, we are not simply administering the test without having a validation, without making a draft, or without simply making table of specification and etc. Because again, according to research, 12% of the students tend to fail the test because of, again, faulty test construction, meaning to say sometimes we need to ask ourselves as teachers why our students failed to pass the test. It's because they were not able to master the lesson, because they are not paying attention during your class, or it's because on the test itself because of the faulty test construction. That's why, again, as teachers, we need to bear in mind what are these thumbs up rule in making tests. Now, first thing to do, step number one is to identify test objectives. You know what are objectives, right? Definitely, test objective refers to your learning objectives of the lesson. Meaning to say, to make it easier for you to identify what are your test objectives, you need to gather all the learning objectives from your lesson. Or for instance, what are the coverage of your lesson? Gather all the learning objectives so that you will not be making any more or you will not be making any more test objectives. Once you're done identifying test objectives, you will proceed to deciding on what test type you are going to prepare. It's either standardized test, it's either teacher-made test, or etc. If you will be making teacher-made test, what type of objective type of test are you going to prepare? It's either true or false, matching type, enumeration, identification, and so on and so forth. Once you identify the type of test, you will proceed to preparing your table of specification, other known as your TOS. Later on, I'll be showing to you what is an example, or yes, what is an example of table of specification, and then what are the different steps on how to create TOS. After which, once you're done with your TOS, you have your table of specs, you construct the test items. So you will be having the draft. Take note, do not administer the test if it's still a draft, because many of us are guilty of that. And then the last but not the least, you need to try out first and validate before you administer the test. So these are the 5 major steps in planning and constructing a test. Number 1, identify objective. Number 2, prepare test type. Number 3, create table of specs. Number 4, construct the draft of your test. And number 5, you need to try out and you need to validate your test. Now, let's start with each of the following stages. Learning objectives. Again, this is just a recapitulation. This is just a recall of your principles of teaching one lesson in terms of making objective. Now, objective. Learning objective is your statement of what students will be able to do when they have completed instruction, meaning to say this is your target, this is your what student to achieve at the end of the lesson. So this is your end in mind. Remember in making learning objectives, and what are those? Number 1, objective, it should be clear. You need to define clearly what is your objective. It's very important. What to teach, how to teach, and why to teach. So begin with the end in mind. Objectives with the students, and make sure that your students own the learning objective. Take note, you did not own the learning objective, but it's meant for your students. sure that your learning objective must be in three domains. We have the cognitive, affective, and the psychomotor. So cognitive, you are developing knowledge. Affective, you are touching attitudes and values. And psychomotor, you are developing skills. We have cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. In some other references, they have KSA. K stands for the knowledge for cognitive, S for skill for psychomotor, and then A for attitude for affective domain. So we have KSA, knowledge, skills, and attitude. So they are just the same with CAP, cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. So you touch the mind, you touch the heart, and then you touch or you extend the hands. Talking about the different domains of learning, under Bloom's taxonomy, we have the KC Apanse. So that's our mnemonic device. Don't forget KC Apanse. K stands for the knowledge, C for comprehension, AP for application, AN for analysis, S for synthesis, and then E for evaluation. So again, our mnemonic device is KC Apanse. As a recap, knowledge refers to recall of information, the lowest level. Comprehension, you understand. Application, you put things or knowledge into practice. You put theories into application. Analysis is you identify, you break down data into smaller pieces of information. You synthesize, meaning to say you put things together. That's the opposite of analysis. And then the highest level, according to Benjamin Bloom, is the evaluation. When you evaluate again, you make judgment, you render judgment. It's either you are giving a rating, solving, or recommending, so on and so forth. Analyze or study this diagram or illustration first. Take note, the domain from 1956 was changed last 2001. And if we're going to look at the domains or the level of the domains from the highest level, which is evaluation, it was changed into creating or creation. And aside from that, from noun, it became into verb. And which one do you think is Bloom's taxonomy and Anderson's taxonomy? That's perfect. So this is the noun is according to Benjamin Bloom, and then the verb that's according to Lauren Anderson. So this is for 1956. That's according to Benjamin Bloom, and it was revised by his student Lauren Anderson last 2001. So it became verb. So we have remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and take note the highest level is creating. So this is the revised Bloom's taxonomy according to Lauren Anderson. Lauren spelled as Lorin, Anderson Anderson. 4. Learning objectives should be relevant and responsive. Learning objectives should be connected to our students' life experiences, which is very true. That's why sometimes our students have difficulty to grasp the lesson because we are not giving examples which they can relate and they can use or apply what they have learned inside the classroom into the real world experiences. So, for instance, what makes learning meaningful and connected to their daily life experiences is that when you apply whatever you have learned inside the classroom in the outside world. 5. Very important to master this acronym SMART. And you know what's the meaning of S? MART, right? So S as a wild guess, what is the meaning of S? Okay, that's perfect. Your S stands for specific. What about M? Perfect. That's measurable. What about A? Attainable. What about R? Relevant. And T stands for time-based. All right. However, in some other references, relevant is other known as your result oriented, and then time based is other known as your terminal. terminal, meaning to say endpoint, terminal, or time bound. So they are synonymous: relevant or result oriented, and then time based or time bound. So when we talk about specific, of course, it's not general. Measurable, there is quantity involved. Attainable, of course, it is achievable. Relevant, and time based or time bound. Number six, of course, we need to observe the elements of ABCD according to Robert Mager. And A stands for audience, B for behavior, C for condition, and then D for degree. However, your audience was changed into actor. It's because nowadays our students are not anymore mere spectators inside the classroom, but they are performers. That's why they are called actors inside the classroom. All right, so we are done with the first stage in terms of making your test. We identified already your learning objectives, your test objectives, and then we also identified what are the different points that we need to remember in making test objectives. The second step is what I have said, to identify your test type. So it's either objective test, it's either standardized test, so on and so forth. Now, since most of the time we are making objective type of test, we will be discussing what are the advantages and the disadvantages as well as the different types of objective test. Now, first, let's talk about the advantages of objective test. It says here, the sampling of objective examination is more representative and so measurement is more extensive, meaning to say, the more that we are using objective type of test, we can measure all levels of Bloom's taxonomy from knowledge until evaluation. Is not subjective because the responses are single word, meaning to say what is correct answer, that's it, that's the correct answer, meaning to say there's no other interpretation of what's the best or single best answer. Objective test is better prepared than essay test because there are principles to be applied in its construction. The disadvantages, however, is it's harder to prepare. However, it's easy to check. So that's the disadvantage. It's difficult. Yeah, it's really difficult to prepare objective type of test. And generally, it measures factual knowledge, unlike with your essay. It's more on simple recall. That's why sometimes students tend to guess the correct answer, especially if you are asking for the best answer. For instance, multiple choice, it's either they will guess A, B, C, or D, or for instance, you are giving true or false, they will guess either the answer is true or false, and etc. It does not help nor encourage the development or the ability of the students to organize and express their ideas, which is contrary to essay type of test. So that's the disadvantage. Encourages memory or work even without understanding, is what I have said. It's prone for to guessing. It is easier to cheat in any objective examination rather than a essay examination, which is very true. Examples of your objective type of test: true or false, matching type, multiple choice enumeration, labeling, identification, completion type, and simple recall. So let's go to the different thumbs up rule in constructing first the true false type of test. Okay, rule number one. Do not give a hint in the body of a question. What does it mean? Meaning to say the statement itself leads to the answer. So do not give any clue. Rule number two, avoid using words such as always, never, often, and other adverbs that tend to be either always true or always false. For example, you'll be saying the sun always rises on east and sets on west. So the answer is true because of the adverb always. Avoid long sentences as this tends to be true. For example, your item number one is very short and your item number two is very lengthy. So definitely students might think why this item is too lengthy. And it seems that it explains the correct answer. So it tends to be true if that's the case. So avoid rule number three. Rule number four, avoid trick statements with some misleading words. For example, let's say your statement is the principles of teaching is my favorite subject. So that's it. However, instead of using the word principle, you change it with the word principal. So that's an example of misleading statement. So again, take note, it will not measure level of comprehension and understanding. However, it leads to trick your student and it will it will yield, it will lead your students to get the wrong answer. Rule number five, avoid quoting verbatim from reference material or textbooks, meaning to say you just copy and pasted from any reference material and then you place the item in your test. For example, even the quotation on the textbook, you just copy pasted and then you place it as your item in your true or false type of test. Rule number six, avoid specific determiners like no, all, always, as what they have said. So avoid these adverbs. And number seven, avoid using patterns. So why? Why do we need to avoid using patterns? Of course, sometimes our students tend to guess the pattern if they're fond of guessing the pattern. Meaning to say they're not anymore going to think whether the answer is true or false. However, they will guess what's the pattern of your true or false type of test. For instance, if you're fond of giving TF type of test and then you always put item number one as true item. So definitely, even the statement is false, they will answer true. It's because of the pattern that they are used to answer with. So let's go with the second type of your objective type of test, which is your multiple choice test. What are the different thumbs up rule that we need to observe? Right. So roll VTR rule number one. The stem of the item should be meaningful by itself and should not present a definite problem. Meaning to say, your question should have an answer. That's it. Second, the item should be free from irrelevant material, meaning to say do not beat around the bush. What does that mean? Meaning to say, make sure that you are straight to the point when you are asking question, unless if it is a situation that is part of your question. Number three, use a negative word in the stem is needed only and highlight it for emphasis. For example, use of words like not, except, shall not included, so on and so forth. So you need to avoid these terms. Or you can use it, however, you need to put emphasis like you can put in bold words or you can highlight so on and so forth. All right, so for instance you have the question among the following is true except, so you need to highlight the negative word which is except, which is not an example of a flower, so you need to emphasize not, because sometimes students tend to mislead or they tend to overlook that negative word. 4. An item should contain one single best answer. As what I have said, since this is an objective type of test and it's multiple choice, it's really impossible that your multiple choice item test has two answers. Again, there should be one best answer. Number 5, all the structures should be plausible or attractive. Take note of this rule, meaning to say if you are asking about flowers, what is our national flowers or flowering mean? Definitely all options must be flowers. What is our national fruit? All options must be fruits. So do not put options which are obvious not the correct answer. Of course, that will also test the difficulty level of your test. Number six, rule number six, the length of the option should not give a clue. Take note, many instances you encountered multiple choice item wherein there are options which are quite lengthy compared with other options, right? So sometimes the longest option tends to be true, or the other way around, the shortest option tends to be true. So just not to give the clue, it should be equal in terms of length. Rule number seven, use of special alternatives such as none of the above or all of the above. Oh, this is my favorite part. Should be used sparingly, meaning to say very seldom to use all of the above because you've noticed when we use all of the above, it tends to be the correct answer. Number eight, always have the stem and alternatives on the same page, meaning to say if your option is on page 2 and then your question is on page 1, so all you need to do is to place them on the same page. If you don't have enough space in your paper, you can move your stem on the same page so you can place it on the second page. What's my point here? It's difficult for you to flip flop, for you to check what's the stem and then what's the option, so on and so forth. So I hope you get what I mean. Rule number nine, the alternative should be arranged logically, meaning to say, if your item number one, you arrange the options horizontally. So all throughout the rest of the items must be arranged also horizontally because sometimes students tend to confuse in terms of the options. For instance, for item number one, you arrange it horizontally, and then for item number two, you arrange it vertically. For instance, student really answer letter A. However, it's because of the illogical arrangement of the options. So he or she answered letter B, for instance. So yeah, we need to avoid this one. So we are done with our multiple choice type of test. So let's proceed with the matching type of test. What then are the different rules in constructing matching type of test? Roll VTR, rule number one. Use only homogeneous material in single matching exercise. What does it mean? As what I have said, if we are testing students' knowledge about, for example, insects. So we could not mix insects with the plants, with the other animals, and etc. So use only homogeneous. Homo means one single material for a matching exercise. Include an equal number of responses and premises, and it should not be used once. Meaning to say, again, as a recap, your response is located in column A or column B. Perfect. That's located in column B, and then your premises is located in your column A. So column B or responses must more in terms of numbers compared to your column B. For example, your column A or your premises has 5 items, so your responses must consist of 6 items to make it unequal. Number three, keep the list of premises brief at the left, all right, and short responses at the right. So your responses are the options, and then your premises are the question, but it should be brief. Rule number four, indicate clear directions on how to match. It's either they're going to put lines to match column A and column B, or are they going to write the letter of the correct answer before the item, so on and so forth. Number five, place all the items for one matching type exercise on the same page, likewise with the multiple choice type of test. Rule number six, limit matching exercise to not more than 10 to 15 items. 20 or beyond is much. And take note, it depends on the level as well of the learners. So for instance, you can have 7 to 10 for elementary. For high school, you can have 10 to 15. But as what you have said, 20 is too much. That's it. So we are done with the matching type. Let's proceed to the last but not definitely the least objective type of test, which is your essay. Rule number one, restrict the essay question to those learning outcomes that are not satisfactorily measured by objective items. Right? What does it mean? Meaning to say, if you really wanted to measure higher order thinking skills, better to use essay type of test. If you want to analyze, if you want to evaluate, so it belongs to the higher level of thinking. Second, phrase the direction in such a way that students are guided on key concepts to be included. Number three, inform the students on the criteria to be used, meaning to say, present what are the gauge of evaluation, what will be the scoring rubrics to be used in your essay type of test. What's the purpose? Of course, for your students to be guided in which criterion are they going to do well more, are they going to focus with, so on and so forth. Number four, put a time limit on essay test. Definitely, we are not giving essay test for a week or for a month, so it must be uh, time bound, as what they have said. Number five, evaluate all students' answer to one question before proceeding to the next question. Meaning to say, for instance, if you have 5 students in a class, so all you need to do is to check first all item number one before you check all item number two. What's the purpose? Again, for you to avoid halo effect or generalization. What we have here, let's discuss the last but not definitely the least. We have here your supply type of test. So what then are the thumbs up rule? So rule number one, word the item so that the required answer is both brief and specific. Take note, supply test or fill in the blank is under objective type of test, and therefore it requires one single best answer. So you need to identify whether are they going to answer a phrase, a word, a symbol, or an image, so it must be specific. Number two, do not take statements directly from the textbook. Again, do not be verbatim. Do not just copy pasted text or let's say quotations from the textbooks and then you indicate as your test item. Rule number three, if the item requires numerical unit, indicate the type of answer. Are they going to, let's say, the answer is 2021, are they going to answer the symbol or are they going to word the answer? 4. Blanks for the answer should be equal in terms of length. Take note, if your length varies, definitely it gives an idea that if the length is longer, or I mean the blank is longer, definitely it requires a longer answer. If the blank is short, it requires a short answer. So do not give a clue based on the length of your blanks. It should be equal regardless of the answer. Number five, do not include too many blanks. For example, the blank is the blank and the blank and the blank. So it's not anymore a supply type of test. Take note, supply type of test is used to measure comprehension level of the students. The other term of supply test is not only fill in the blanks but also it refers to the closed test, CLOZE, closed test, meaning to say this type of test is used to measure the level of reading comprehension of the student. Now, when are you going to omit word or phrases in the statement? So technically speaking, in closed test, you are counting the fifth or the seventh word in every sentence. So for instance, for rule number five, we have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if we're going to count the fifth word, so do not include too many, we will omit many and then that's the time that we're going to indicate the blank here, right? Again, it could be the fifth or the seventh word of the sentence. And take note, do not ever omit the first word of the statement because it's difficult for you to comprehend the statement anymore.